Mommy, are we safe now? Yes, baby. We're safe now. I lied. Not because I wanted to, because I needed it to be true badly enough that saying it out loud felt like it could make it real. Maya was 4 years old, sitting at our kitchen table with her feet dangling, juice box in hand, looking at me with those eyes that already understood too much. And I smiled at her, and I lied through every tooth in my mouth. The judge had signed the restraining order that morning. 500 feet. That's what they gave us. 500 feet of legal distance between us and the man who had spent 3 years teaching me that love and fear could live in the same house. I folded that paper and put it in my purse like it was a shield. That's the thing nobody tells you about restraining orders. They don't feel like protection. They feel like the system looked directly at your situation, decided, yes, this man is dangerous, and handed you a document instead of a solution. You carry it because it's the only thing they gave you. Because what else are you supposed to do? But paper doesn't stop obsession. Paper doesn't stop a man who has decided your leaving was a war declaration. Paper doesn't stop Damon. That Tuesday night, I was walking Maya through the parking garage after my shift. Level 2. Bay 14. A walk I'd done 100 times. Maya was telling me about a lion she'd colored that afternoon. She'd picked gold because, in her words, gold is brave and warm, Mommy. Lions need to be both. My daughter, 5 years old, saying things like that. I was nodding, smiling, half listening the way exhausted mothers do. My mind was already at home, already thinking about dinner, already counting down the steps to my car. 20 feet. 15. Maya stopped walking. Not slowed, stopped. Her hand locked around mine, not the easy grip of a happy child, but the grip of a child who has spent enough time in a tense household that her body learned to read danger before her mind could name it. Mommy. One word, but I heard everything underneath it, and then I heard it too. Footsteps, deliberate, measured, already knowing exactly where I was. I didn't look back. I moved, pulled Maya with me, dug for my keys. 12 feet, 10, 8. Layla. Everything in me stopped. That voice. His voice. The one that taught me fear doesn't always come with volume. Sometimes it comes quiet, calm, decided. Damon stepped out from behind the pillar. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look erratic. He looked worse than both. He looked like a man who had been sitting alone with a decision long enough to stop being afraid of it. You really thought that little piece of paper meant something? Damon. He moved. The keys ripped from my hand so violently the metal split my palm. The fob beeped. The car unlocked. He wasn't here for me. He was going for the back door. Maya's door. Get in the car, baby. Get in now. Maya scrambled for the handle. She yanked it open and threw herself inside. The door barely closed behind her before Damon's hand slammed against it from the outside. I threw myself against it from mine, back flat against the glass, arms out, every part of me a wall. She's my daughter. His voice cracked. That ugly, cornered sound of a man who had rewritten everything until he was the victim. Until this was justice. Damon, she's scared, please. Move. Maya was screaming behind me. Just my name. Mommy. 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 Her hands flat against the window, her face against the glass. I could see her. I needed my face to say it's okay. Mommy's got you even while everything inside me was gone. I looked around that garage. A man at the bottom of the ramp looked directly at us and kept walking. That never leaves you. The ones who looked, who calculated, who chose no. Nobody came. Damon's grip tightened on my wrist, and Maya had gone somewhere past screaming. That hollow, shaking silence of a child who has cried until sound runs out, just breathing. Just saying mommy like it was the last word she owned. Then, silence. Not empty silence, weighted silence. The kind that arrives when something with real authority enters a space. The kind that makes your body respond before your brain understands why. Damon felt it before he turned around. I watched the certainty leave his face. Just drain out of it. And in its place, something I had spent 4 years praying I would one day see on him. Fear. He turned slowly. The man standing at the entrance of the aisle had just ended a phone call. He was sliding his phone into the inside pocket of a jacket that cost more than my monthly rent. No hurry. No alarm. He had read the entire situation in 2 seconds and was already standing calmly on the other side of his decision. Tall, dark 3-piece suit. Korean, sharp-featured. Completely still. Not frozen, settled. The way a man is still when he has never once had to prove he was the most dangerous thing in a room because every room already knew. His eyes moved to Maya's face pressed against the glass. They stayed there. And something shifted in them. Not rage. Something older and quieter than rage. Something that looked like a man who made himself a promise a long time ago, and was only now being given the chance to keep it. He began walking toward us, unhurried, each step like a period at the end of a sentence. Damon stepped forward. You lost? Walk away. This doesn't involve you. The man stopped. He looked at Damon the way you look at something already finished. She is not your wife. No raised voice, no anger, no performance. Just the flat, absolute certainty of a man informing you of something that is no longer up for discussion. And this? His eyes dropped to Damon's hand locked around my wrist. Is over. If you are watching this right now, I don't care where in the world you are. I don't care if it is the middle of the night and this found you somehow. Please hit that like button. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because I genuinely want to say hello to you and know just how far this story is traveling. And if anything you just heard felt familiar, if any part of it felt like something you've been carrying, I see you. I really do. What happened in the next 60 seconds will stay with you. But who this man actually was, and why he was already in that garage that night, and why he already knew my daughter's name before I ever learned his. Subscribe right now. Because that truth changes everything you think you just watched. He didn't wait for Damon to respond. He was already moving. One hand closed around Damon's wrist, the one locked around mine. And the grip he applied was precise, surgical. Damon's face changed instantly. The entitlement, the cold certainty, all of it, collapsed into something raw and confused. His fingers released my wrist before his brain even issued the instruction. I stumbled backward, caught myself against the car. Damon spun, swinging his free arm. It didn't land. The man stepped inside the arc of it like he'd already seen it coming, caught Damon by the collar and drove him once, clean, controlled, into the concrete pillar. The sound echoed through the entire level. Damon slid down it slowly. No dramatics, no rage. The man in the dark suit simply straightened, adjusted the front of his jacket, and turned to look at me. That was when I got my first real look at his face. Sharp features, jaw set like stone, slicked black hair that hadn't moved through any of it. And his eyes, dark, steady, and carrying something I still don't have the exact word for. Not pity, not curiosity. Something closer to recognition. Like he was looking at a situation he had seen before in some form and had made himself a rule about. He didn't introduce himself. He looked at the car. Is she hurt? It took me a second to understand he meant Maya. I turned and pulled the door open. She was folded into the corner of the back seat, knees to her chest, still shaking. The moment she saw my face, she launched herself at me and I caught her. Both of us on our knees on the concrete, her arms locked around my neck so tight I could barely breathe. Mommy's here. I've got you. I've got you. I don't know how long we stayed like that. When I finally looked up, two men in dark suits had appeared from somewhere. I hadn't seen them arrive, hadn't heard them, and they were stationed on either side of Damon, who was conscious but hadn't tried to stand. He looked smaller now. Whatever he had walked into that garage believing about himself, it was gone. The man crouched down to Maya's eye level. He didn't rush it, didn't make it performative. He just waited until she turned to look at him on her own terms. "You did well," he said quietly. "You were very brave." Maya studied him for a long moment with those eyes that missed nothing. Then she nodded, once, and buried her face back in my neck. He stood, looked at me. "The police have been called. They'll take him in for violating the order." A pause. "Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight?" Yes, yes, I'm fine." He looked at me the way people look at you when they know you're lying but choose not to say so. "Drive carefully." He reached into his jacket and produced a card. Simple, expensive, just a name and a number. He held it out and waited until I took it. Then he walked away. No explanation, no lingering, just gone. Back into the dark end of the garage like he'd simply been passing through, and the most terrifying 2 minutes of my life had been a minor interruption. I sat in that car for 20 minutes before I could start the engine. Maya fell asleep on the drive home, her lion drawing still in her fist. I didn't sleep at all. I went to work the next morning because I didn't know what else to do. That's what survival looks like. Nobody tells you that. It's not strength. It's just the absence of alternatives. You get up. You get your daughter to school. You show up. Ms. Carroll at the front desk took one look at my face and didn't ask a single question. Just put a cup of coffee on the counter in front of me and squeezed my hand once. That was enough. By 10 o'clock, I had almost convinced myself I was fine. That's when I noticed him. He was standing near the entrance of the building across the street. Dark suit. Still. Not looking at his phone, not smoking, not doing any of the things people do when they're simply waiting somewhere. Just standing. Watching the entrance to Hargrove Medical Center with the patient, unhurried attention of someone who had been told to be there and intended to stay. I told myself it was coincidence. By noon there was a different one. Same build, same suit, same stillness. Positioned near the parking structure this time, close enough to see my car from where he stood. I pulled out the card. Han Tae-yong. I turned it over. Nothing on the back. Just the number on the front, clean and precise, like everything else about him. I called the school. "Everything is fine, Ms. Mitchell," the receptionist told me. "Maya had a great morning. She's at lunch right now." Is anyone outside the building? Anyone you don't recognize?" A pause. "There are two gentlemen near the front gate. They said they were contracted security. We assumed you arranged it. Should we be concerned?" I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "They're fine. Thank you." I hung up and stared at the card for a long time. I didn't wait for him to make the next move. I wasn't built for waiting anymore. I called the number that evening. I found him that evening. I don't know what I expected. Some office, some restaurant, somewhere that matched the expensive suit and the business card. Instead, the number connected me to a woman with a professional, unhurried voice who told me Mr. Han was available and gave me an address. It was a hotel. His hotel, I would later learn. The kind with no signage out front because the people who needed to know about it already did. He was waiting in a private lounge on the 4th floor. Dark wood, low lighting, a city view that stretched out behind him like something staged. He stood when I walked in, which surprised me, and gestured to the seat across from him. I didn't sit. "Who are the men outside my building?" "Security." "I didn't ask for security." "No," he agreed. "You didn't." I stared at him. You can't just... Damon Hayes was released on bail this morning. He said it the way you deliver a fact. No softening. No apology for the bluntness. He posted within 4 hours of his arrest. The charges are there, but the process is slow. In the meantime, he is out. And based on last night, I think we both understand that a restraining order will not change his behavior. The air went out of me. Released. 4 hours. You can't just put men outside my workplace without asking me, I said, but the heat had gone out of it. I can ask if you prefer. His eyes held mine. But my answer will be the same regardless. I won't leave you and your daughter unprotected. You don't know me. Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile. Something more controlled than that. Sit down, Ms. Mitchell. I sat down. He poured water without asking, set it in front of me, and leaned back in his chair with the settled patience of a man who never rushed anything. The men outside your building and your daughter's school are there until the situation with your ex-husband is resolved, he said. They will not interfere with your day. You won't notice them unless you need to, but they will be there. And if I say no, then I would ask you to think about Maya. Low, but not manipulative. He said it the way someone says something true when they'd rather not have to. I looked down at my hands. The palm where the key had split the skin was still bandaged. I'd done it myself at 2 a.m, sitting on the bathroom floor so I wouldn't wake Maya. Why? I asked quietly. Why do you care what happens to us? He didn't answer immediately. That was something I would come to understand about him. He never spent words he hadn't already decided to spend. Have dinner with me, he said. Friday. Somewhere Maya would enjoy. I looked up. That's not an answer. It's a start. Friday came before I was ready for it. He picked us up at 7. A black car, a driver who didn't speak, and Tae-yong in the back seat already, the door held open with a patience that felt like it had no expiration date. Maya climbed in without hesitation. She had already decided something about him that I hadn't caught up to yet, and spent the entire drive telling him about a bird she'd seen on the playground that she was convinced understood Korean. How do you know it understood Korean? He asked, completely serious. Because I said "annyeong" and it looked at me. He considered this. That is compelling. Evidence. Maya nodded firmly. I watched them and said nothing. The restaurant was Korean. Small, warm, tucked into a building that looked like nothing from the outside. The staff greeted him by name with a particular kind of deference that wasn't just about good service. It was the deference of people who understood exactly who they were greeting. Maya's eyes went wide at the table grill. We cook our own food? You do the honors, Tae-yong told her, and spent the next hour teaching her which cuts went first and how to tell when the meat was ready and why patience was the most important ingredient in any meal. She burned exactly 1 piece of beef. He told her it was the best thing he'd eaten all year. I watched her glow and felt something break open quietly inside my chest. When Maya excused herself to find the bathroom with the waitress, the warmth at the table shifted. Not coldly, just honestly. You said Friday would be a start, I said. Start of what? He looked at me, steadily. An explanation. Then explain. He turned his water glass once on the table. Just once. I own the Hargrove Medical Building, he said. The entire complex. I've owned it for 2 years. I went very still. 3 weeks before the parking garage, he continued, I was doing a walkthrough of the property. Routine. I was leaving through the east corridor when I saw you. A pause. You were in the waiting area. Maya was at the front desk coloring. You were on your lunch break, and you were on the phone. With a lawyer, I assume, based on the conversation. And you were keeping your voice completely level even though whatever they were telling you was clearly not good news. You hung up. Sat very still for approximately 10 seconds. And then, You walked back to your desk. I remembered that call. The lawyer telling me Damon's first hearing had been postponed. I'd held it together until I got to my car that evening. You noticed that, I said. I notice people who are holding more than they should have to hold. His jaw tightened slightly. I had my security team do a routine background on the building's staff afterward. Standard procedure. Your file included the restraining order. You were watching me. I assigned 2 men to keep a general eye on the building, he said. Not on you specifically, but yes, after that, on you specifically. I should have been angry. Part of me reached for it. But I kept thinking about the parking garage, about how quickly he had appeared, about the fact that my daughter had fallen asleep safely in her own bed that night. The parking lot, I said. You were already there. Damon followed you from the building. My men flagged it and called me. I was 2 minutes behind him. Something shifted in his expression. He moved faster than anticipated. He got to you before I reached level 2. That won't happen again. You can't promise that. Ms. Mitchell. He said my name the way people say something they want you to actually hear. I am very good at the things I promise. I looked at him across that table. This man in his dark suit with his careful words and his heavy rings and the shadow of something on his wrist that the cuff of his shirt almost but never quite covered. And I understood, fully and without any remaining doubt, that Han Tae-yong operated in a world that ran on entirely different rules than the one that had handed me a piece of paper and called it safety. I also understood something else. I hadn't felt afraid once since the parking garage. Maya came back from the bathroom, climbed into her seat, and immediately told Tae-yong she had decided the restaurant bird was definitely bilingual. He listened to the full theory. On the drive home, Maya fell asleep against my arm. Tae-yong sat across from us in the dark car, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. "Why are you really doing this?" I asked quietly, so as not to wake her. He was silent long enough that I thought he wouldn't answer. "I had a daughter," he said finally. His voice was the same as always, controlled, measured, but something underneath it had changed. Her name was Sue-ah. She was 4 years old. I didn't move. 8 years ago. A car accident. He looked out the window. Her mother, too. I was in a meeting when it happened. I got the call afterward. The city moved past the glass. I have spent 8 years, he said, being very powerful and having no one left to protect. Maya shifted in her sleep. Her hand found mine and held it. I looked at Tae-yong. He was still looking out the window, but his jaw was tight and his hands were flat on his knees, and he looked, for the first and only time since I'd met him, like a man carrying the full weight of something he had never once put down. When I saw Damon's hand on that door, he said quietly, I thought, not again. Not if I can stop it. The car was silent the rest of the way home. He walked us to the door, waited until the locks turned, and when I looked back through the peephole, he was still standing there in the hallway for a long moment before he finally turned and left. I stood in my dark entryway with my sleeping daughter against my shoulder, and the business card still in my coat pocket. For the first time in 4 years, I felt like something was standing between us and the dark, and I hadn't had to hold it up alone. I slept through the night. I shouldn't have, because while I was sleeping, Damon was already figuring out exactly how to get around the men in the dark suits. The note was taped to my front door. No envelope. No name. Just a folded piece of paper pressed flat against the wood like he wanted me to find it the second I came home. Like he wanted me to know he'd been close enough to touch my door. Close enough to stand in the hallway where my daughter slept 10 feet away. I stood there for a long moment before I touched it. Inside, 4 words. You can't hide forever. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. 3 months ago, that note would have sent me to the bathroom floor. But something had shifted in me since the parking garage. Some wire had been tripped, and what I felt standing in that hallway wasn't fear. It was fury. I photographed it, called the police, filed the report with the same officer who had taken my statement after the garage, who looked at the note and told me they would add it to the file and that I should call if anything else happened. I thanked him. I hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark after Maya was asleep, and I stared at the ceiling and I thought about what 4 words taped to a door actually meant. It meant the bail hadn't scared him. It meant the arrest hadn't scared him. It meant the men in the dark suits hadn't scared him enough. I called Tae-yong. He answered on the second ring. I read him the 4 words without preamble. There was a silence on the other end. Not the silence of someone processing, but the silence of someone going very still. Was Maya home? She was inside. She didn't see it. Another silence. Different quality this time. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. You don't need to. He had already hung up. He arrived in 18. I opened the door and he stood in the hallway in a dark jacket, no tie for once, and looked at the spot on the door where the tape had left a faint mark. He looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then he looked at me. I had seen Tae-yong calm. I had seen him controlled and measured and deliberately unhurried. I had seen him gentle with Maya and precise with his words, and careful with everything he chose to show. I had not seen this. His face hadn't changed. That was what made it different. It wasn't anger the way anger usually looks. Raised voice, tight jaw, heat rising to the surface. It was the opposite. Everything had gone inward. Quiet. Consolidated. The way a storm looks from a distance before it reaches you, he photographed the tape mark himself. Said nothing. Came inside, sat at my kitchen table and made 2 phone calls in Korean, both brief, both in a register so low I couldn't have heard them clearly even if I'd understood the language. When he was done, he set the phone face down on the table. He won't come back to this building, he said. How can you? He won't. I looked at him across the table. What are you going to do? He met my eyes. What needs to be done? He left an hour later. 2 of his men took positions in the building that night. One in the lobby, one on my floor. I knew because I checked. And for the first time in weeks, I locked my door and felt the lock actually mean something. I didn't ask what happened that night. I didn't ask because some part of me already understood that there were rooms in Tae-yong's world I wasn't supposed to see. Not because he was hiding them from me dishonestly, but because he had built his entire presence in my life around being the wall, not making me stare at what the wall was made of. I learned pieces of it anyway, the way you learn things you weren't directly told. One of his men, the one who drove me to work now, quietly, without announcement, as though it had simply always been the arrangement, let something slip 3 days after the note. He said carefully that Mr. Han had handled a matter personally, that it had required his direct attention, that Damon had been given a very clear understanding of the consequences of any further contact. I nodded. Didn't ask what very clear understanding looked like at whatever hour Tae-yong had chosen to deliver it. But Damon knew. I could feel it the way you feel the absence of something that had been pressing against you for so long you'd stopped noticing the pressure. The calls stopped. The blocked numbers stopped cycling. The particular quality of dread I carried in my shoulders every time I walked to my car. It didn't disappear, but it loosened. Just slightly. Just enough. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like waiting. Because I knew Damon. And I knew that a man who had spent 4 years convincing himself he was the wronged party did not receive a nighttime visit from someone like Tae-yong and simply recalibrate. He retreated. He regrouped. He came back from a different angle. I knew it. I just didn't know when. The when arrived on a Wednesday. It had been a hard week before it. Maya had caught a cold that kept her home from school for 2 days, which meant I'd used the last of my sick time and had to work remotely from the apartment while managing her fever and her boredom simultaneously. The certification coursework I was doing at night had a deadline I was behind on. I hadn't slept more than 5 consecutive hours in 10 days. I was tired in a way that had moved past the body and into something deeper. The kind of tired that sits behind your eyes and makes everything feel slightly too heavy to hold. Tae-yong had been checking in daily, a text in the morning, a call most evenings. He didn't make it feel like surveillance. He made it feel like the kind of consistency that people who've never had it don't have a word for yet. But that Wednesday evening when he called and asked how I was, I made the mistake of answering honestly. "I'm fine," I said. And then, without any warning or intention, I wasn't. Something broke open. Quietly at first. Just my voice going unsteady in a way I couldn't immediately correct. And then not quietly at all. I pressed my hand over my mouth in the hallway outside Maya's room and slid down the wall and cried in the specific way I had been refusing to let myself cry for months. Ugly and total and completely without dignity. I heard him on the other end. He didn't speak. He didn't try to fix it or rush it or offer the kind of words people offer when they don't know what else to do. He just stayed on the line and let me fall apart completely and didn't make me feel like a single piece of it was too much. When it finally ran out, I was sitting on the floor with my back against the wall and my face in my hands, and I felt hollow and lighter at the same time. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't. I don't. I don't usually." Layla. My name, quiet and direct. "I'm coming over." "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said simply. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. He brought food. That detail has stayed with me, that he stopped somewhere on the way and brought actual food, the kind Maya liked, because he had been paying attention to what Maya liked. He set it on the counter without making it a moment and sat with me at the kitchen table while Maya ate in front of the television, already on the mend and completely unconcerned with adult things. We didn't talk about Damon. We didn't talk about security details or restraining orders or any of it. He asked about the certification program. I told him about the module I was behind on and the instructor who explained things in a way that finally made sense to me, and the way it felt to be learning something again after years of just surviving. He listened the way he always listened, fully, without the distracted half-attention most people offered. At some point, Maya fell asleep on the couch. The apartment went quiet. I looked at him across the table and I said, without planning to, "Aren't you tired?" He looked up. "Of what?" "All of it. Managing everything, running whatever it is you run, carrying." I stopped. "Don't you ever just want to put it down?" He was quiet for a moment. "There was a long time," he said, "when I didn't have anything worth putting it down for." He looked at Maya's sleeping form on the couch. "That's changed." I didn't say anything, but I reached across the table and I put my hand over his, and he looked down at our hands and then back at me, and something in his face that was always composed shifted into something simply human. We stayed like that for a while. He carried Maya to her bed before he left. I watched him do it. The care he used, the way he made sure she didn't wake, the way he pulled the blanket up and stood there for just a second in the doorway of her room before he turned away. And I thought about a little girl named Sue Ah who had been 4 years old and who had not gotten to grow up. I thought about what it cost him to walk into that room. I thought about him doing it anyway. The call came on a Thursday morning. Maya's school. A voice I didn't recognize, tighter than it should have been for a routine call. "Ms. Mitchell, we need you to come in. There's been an incident near the front entrance. Maya is safe. She's inside with her teacher. But we need you here." I was already moving before she finished the sentence. I called Tae-yong while I ran for the elevator. He picked up immediately. Something's happening at Maya's school. A beat. Just one. I'm already on my way. Don't go to the front. Entrance. Go to the side door on Clement Street. My man will meet you there. How did you... Go. I went. The side door opened before I reached it. One of his men held it and moved me inside without a word. The school hallways were in a controlled kind of chaos. Teachers keeping children in classrooms, administration on phones. Maya was in the main office sitting in a chair with her backpack in her lap, completely still. When she saw me, she stood up and walked into my arms and didn't make a sound. That stillness was worse than crying would have been. The principal told me what had happened in a low, careful voice. 3 men. They'd appeared at the front gate at drop-off time, after the morning rush had thinned. They'd asked for Maya by name, said they were family. The gate attendant had followed protocol. Maya wasn't cleared for release to anyone but me, but one of the men had already reached over the gate. He had his hand on the latch. If Ms. Davis hadn't physically stepped between them and the playground entrance, they would have walked straight in. They left only when they heard the sirens. 30 more seconds and they would have had her. 3 men. This wasn't Damon being impulsive. This was Damon being organized. This was Damon having thought it through. Planned it. Recruited people. Chosen a moment when he calculated the security perimeter would be thinnest. This was the thing I had known was coming and hadn't been able to stop. Tae-yong arrived 20 minutes after I did. He came through the side entrance, 2 of his men flanking him, and the principal, who had been professionally calm through everything, took one look at the 3 of them and went slightly pale. Tae-yong didn't offer an explanation. He asked to see the gate footage, and the principal handed over access without a single question about why. He watched it once. His face showed nothing. He turned to me. Take Maya and go with Kim. He'll take you somewhere safe. Don't go home yet. Where are you going? His eyes met mine, and I saw it again. That thing that wasn't quite anger, that cold and total consolidation. Except this time, it was different. This time, it was personal in a way that went beyond protection and into something that didn't need a name. To end this, he said, I don't know the full shape of what happened that night. I know pieces. The pieces Tae-yong told me afterward, measured and precise, giving me exactly what he judged I needed to know, and holding back the rest with the care of someone who is not hiding things from you, but protecting you from the weight of them. Damon had hired 3 men, low level, the kind that could be recruited quickly and paid in cash, and who had no particular loyalty once things went wrong. Things went wrong immediately. Tae-yong had known about them before they knew he knew. His network extended into corners of the city that local law enforcement had been trying to map for years without success. By the time Damon's hired men were ready to move, every exit had already been covered. The confrontation happened in a warehouse on the east side. I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what was said or exactly how it ended. What I know is that Damon knelt on a concrete floor and faced the full, unobstructed reality of what it meant to have made an enemy of Han Tae-yong. Not the polished, restrained version that sat across dinner tables and listened to 5-year-olds describe bilingual birds, but the version that had built an empire in the dark and maintained it for 15 years and had never once lost. The 3 hired men were gone before the conversation started. They had made the calculation quickly and correctly. Damon did not have good instincts for calculation. That night, Tae-yong said only this. He won't be a problem anymore. The legal process will finish what started in the parking garage. But the other matter, the matter of his willingness to reach for Maya, that has been resolved. Resolved how? He looked at me across my kitchen table. In the way that men who threaten children understand. I nodded. I didn't ask anything else. 2 weeks later, Tae-yong picked us up on a Saturday morning and didn't tell us where we were going. Maya spent the drive trying to teach him a song she'd learned at school. He attempted the chorus exactly once, in a monotone that made her collapse into giggles, and then gravely informed her that he would leave the singing to her. We drove for 40 minutes. The neighborhood we pulled into was quiet. Wide streets, old trees, houses set back from the road with real yards and porch lights that glowed even in the daytime. The kind of neighborhood that felt like the word settled made physical. He stopped in front of a house with a stone front path and a porch, and a red door. "Come inside," he said. I followed him up the path. He unlocked the red door and stepped back for us to enter first. I walked in and stopped moving. It was warm inside. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, windows that let in the kind of light that makes a room feel genuinely lived in rather than staged. A kitchen with actual counter space. A living room large enough for Maya to run in, which she immediately did. A staircase that turned at a landing. "Come upstairs," he said. There were 3 bedrooms. The first was clearly the primary. Soft colors, a reading chair by the window, shelves that were empty and waiting. The second made my throat close. It was Maya's room, already. Bookshelves filled with new books sorted by color because someone had noticed that was how she organized things. A desk for homework. Her exact favorite colors on the walls, a shade I had mentioned exactly once in passing and had not expected anyone to remember. "How did you—" "I paid attention," he said simply. The third room was a home office, desk, a good lamp, a shelf, and on the desk, a folder. My hands were shaking when I opened it. An enrollment. Confirmation for the dental hygiene certification program I had been doing at night. Transferred to a daytime cohort at the institution with the best placement rate in the city. And beneath it, a receipt for full tuition. Paid. I stood there for a long time. "Tae-yong, you said you wanted to be more than what survival made you," he said from the doorway. "This is a start." I turned around. My eyes were wet and I didn't try to stop it. "This is too much." "It isn't." He stepped into the room. "You kept your daughter alive and safe and loved through 4 years of something that would have broken most people. You showed up every single day. You held every single thing alone." He stopped in front of me. "This is not too much. This is what was always owed to you." "Why?" I whispered. "Why us?" He reached into his jacket pocket, held out a single key on a plain ring. "Because you gave me something I had stopped believing I would ever have again," he said quietly. "A reason to come home." Maya appeared in the doorway behind him, already holding 3 of the new books, and deeply invested in a question about whether her room could also have a plant. He turned to look at her. Something crossed his face, open and unguarded in the way I had only seen from him a handful of times and always felt like a privilege. "1 plant," he said. "Your choice." She considered this with the gravity of a small person making a significant decision. "Can it be a big one?" "It can be whatever you want." She nodded and disappeared back down the hall, satisfied. I looked at the key in my hand, small and plain and heavier than it had any right to be. "I don't know how to do this," I said. "Any of it. I don't know how to let someone—" "I know," he said. "You don't have to know yet." He reached out and closed my fingers gently around the key. "I'm not asking you to have it figured out," he said. "I'm asking you to walk through the door." I looked at him. This man who had stepped out of the dark of a parking garage and simply decided, without asking my permission or waiting for my gratitude, that we were worth protecting. This man who had sat with me through the bad nights and carried my daughter to her bed and listened to bird theories with complete seriousness and had never once made me feel like the protection came with a price. This man who had lost everything and built an empire out of the wreckage, and spent 8 years being powerful in a world with no one left to protect. Until us. I closed my hand around the key. Okay, I said. Okay? We'll walk through the door. Something settled in his face. Not a full smile. That wasn't his register. But something that lived in the same neighborhood. Something quiet and certain and finally, deeply at rest. Maya called from down the hall that she had reconsidered and actually wanted 2 plants. He looked at me. I looked at him. And for the first time in 4 years, I laughed without having to think about whether it was safe to. The restraining order was still in my purse. Old now, creased from being folded and unfolded too many times. That piece of paper the system had handed me and called protection. That night, in the kitchen of the house with the red door, I found it at the bottom of my bag. I held it for a moment. Then I set it on the counter. I didn't need to carry it anymore. I had something the court could never issue and no judge could ever sign. I had a man who had decided, quietly, absolutely, without condition, that nothing in this world was going to touch us again. And Han Tae-yong, I had learned, was very good at the things he decided. If Layla's story reminded you that real protection looks like consistency, not just words, not just promises, but a man who shows up every single time. Like the video and hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment and tell me which moment of Tae-yong's protection hit you the hardest. Was it the parking garage? The red door? The moment he carried Maya to her bed? I genuinely want to know. And if you want more stories about women who survived the worst and finally found the fierce, untouchable love they actually deserved, I have plenty more coming. You found this channel for a reason. Don't leave without subscribing. I'll see you in the next one.